And good afternoon. Alan Hoare here from TU Dublin and the Construction IT Alliance. You're all very welcome to our Digital Housing Series webinar. So this is an initiative in association with Enterprise Ireland, and this is our fourth installment in a six-part series, focusing, I suppose, on innovation and digital adoption in particular, that's associated with offsite construction. So today we're looking at building homes faster by use of offsite construction methods. But of course, we're dealing with much more than speed here. We're dealing with sustainability, we're dealing with technology, we're dealing with innovation, and of course, the whole digital transformation that's taking place in the industry. So let's like to start by, just go to slide one, please, Zelenia. And so, as I say, this is a Challenge, Change, Learn initiative from Construction IT Alliance. For this series, DiTech, ProCAD, and of course, the support that Enterprise Ireland have given us, and indeed the support from CETA SkillNet. So our three presenters this afternoon, our three presenters are Mr. James Young, Director of Engineering from Evolution, John Desmond, Managing Director of Signum Building Offsite, and Zoe Kennedy, Head of Communications from Modularize. You may have seen that Modularize contributed to our CETA Tech Live event a few weeks back. So good afternoon, James. Are you ready to start your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I'll share my screen here now. So hopefully, can you see that screen?
Yes, that's all good.
Yeah, very good. So, so thanks, Alan, for the introduction. So I suppose the primary title of the presentation today is based around building homes faster, but I suppose my more specific subject is building sustainable homes through dynamic offsite solutions. So just a summary of what I'll be talking about is just a brief introduction about Evolution. Just talk about the MMC definition framework, examples of MMC project programs, just in relation to the building faster element that we're talking about today, and then a strong element around the sustainable considerations around MMC projects. I have over 16 years experience in the MMC industry. I'm a chartered engineer with Engineers Ireland. In that time, I've worked with over 40 MMC manufacturers across the world. And that's predominantly working in the residential, hotel, student accommodation, educational, and healthcare sector. Within the structural and BIM department, we have the following core departments. So we have the structural engineering that specializes in panelized and modular engineering design. We have a research and development sector that assists getting systems certified, innovative product development, and structural and fire testing of products. We have a structural fire engineering element that's really kind of taking off and getting busier and busier at the moment in terms of thermomechanical modeling and fire design of MMC systems. And then we have the sustainability engineering element, especially around the embodied carbon and the value engineering aspect associated with that. So modern methods of construction is a term thrown around quite a bit, but what does it actually all mean? So off the back of the Hackett report done quite recently in the UK, a definition framework was created to define each of the MMC elements that are out there. As you can see, there's up to 7 different categories that pretty much encapsulates all types of MMC systems. And the elements that we predominantly work in is in the category 1 and the category 2 system. So the category 1 is your pre-manufacturing 3D structural systems, your modular systems, and your category 2 is your panelized systems, be it steel, be it timber. So these systems would go through a rigorous manufacturing process to meet the design requirements within each of their respective manufacturing facilities. So once manufactured, it needs to be accurate. So we need to ensure that there's always a design process to accommodate the precision engineered systems. As I said earlier, the primary title of this presentation is Building Homes Faster by Use of Offsite Construction Methods. And just a note on that from our end is faster must not mean lower quality. There must be efficient design process developed, quality control checks in the factory and on site. Repetitive nature of designs will help efficiency and speed of design, manufacture and installation. The utilization of BIM and digital work plans to plan ahead, allowing for rapid installation of MMC systems. And collaboration with all stakeholders on projects is something that's always mentioned and is always key to the successful delivery of any project, in particular any MMC project. And it has been proven that in the past that MMC can deliver projects up to 40% quicker than some traditional methods. Just as a couple of examples, this is an example of a rapid program using a Category 2 system. In 3.5 months, this hospital was completed. Obviously, it was an emergency situation during the pandemic, but still, in 3.5 months to practical completion was still very, very impressive. The main reason for its success was the collaboration between all parties during this design, manufacture, and construction process. Then to take it to the extreme levels, we have an example here from a modular company called Vision Modular Systems, who are based in the UK and who have built many high-rise developments. This is an example of 2 number 11-story blocks in London. And as you can see, the program delivery is off the charts, but this is due primarily due to the collaboration and the processes developed over the years by Vision Modular Systems to deliver such projects. So handing over 2 11-story blocks in less than a year. From the sustainability perspective, so we in Evolution work across many elements of the sustainability area in terms of we be Irish and UK Part L experts. We offer various services in terms of dynamic modeling, U values, approved thermal modeling, Y values, all the way down to daylight analysis, overheating, and whole life carbon assessments. And as you can see there, we have the various qualifications to go with that. The improvement in the Part L requirements over the last number of years has been significant. So it is important to assess projects overall from a Part L and sustainability perspective, and no more so with MMC projects. Here is an example of an embodied carbon life cycle hierarchy that we often work to. So the main sustainability characteristics in relation to MMC would be to increase material efficiency due to a controlled manufacturing process, reduce material waste collection, sorting and recycling is easy to organize and within a factory-based production environment. And lightweight can mean less concrete and foundations and more often than not, less embodied carbon. And then within that, you can see the hierarchy for embodied carbon reduction within an MMC building. And they include build less, so challenge the client's brief for spatial efficiency, reuse and renovate existing instead of new builds where possible. You have build light, where review structural loadings, utilization and spans, reduce material quantities and before relying on specification. The third one would be build wise, know where your carbon is, including big ticket items and repeating small ticket items, and explore your standard modules. The key thing here is design for manufacture and assembly, and that DFMA process is key to this. Build low carbon, so specify low carbon, renewable, bio-based where possible, and be aware of uncertainty and variability in the data that you're using. Number 5, build for the future, design for durability, flexibility, and adaptability, and design for disassembly and circular economy at the end of life, where required and where possible. And then finally, build collaboratively, measurement, verification, and disclosure. So there's a hierarchy there that's a good guide in terms of ensuring that the MMC end product can be as sustainable as possible. in the hospital that I just showed recently, you know, a lightweight facade finish was used, and taking data from the SEI, so the Steel Construction Institute would be an expert body in the UK that has a lot of data relating to MMC systems. But using their technical guidance document, we're able to do a comparison between the facade options to quantify the embodied carbon savings. From this exercise alone, it was possible to quantify the approximate CO2 saved by going with a lightweight as opposed to a traditional brick and block. And as you see, it was relatively significant. So it's these little choices and decisions that can be the difference. Again, in terms of what we do in our sustainability area, you know, we do a lot of daylight analysis and dynamic modeling of various buildings, and these are two buildings. One at the hospital, again, the top one that I showed recently, and the bottom is a separate building as well. But again, through kind of careful analysis and assessment, that we're able to predict the operational carbon footprint, which is looking to meet NZEB requirements. Then going to the next stage, again, looking at the significant modular buildings in the UK that we would work on. Over there are sometimes requirements that need to be 35% better than the Part L. And using the modular systems and the assessments that we have to go through, we're able to come up with a predicted operational carbon footprint, which is relatively low. But that's the requirement that's been driven in these areas. So it's modeled in detail to achieve that. More contractors are turning to offsite methods for a number of reasons. Obviously, program challenges, but I suppose one of the main challenges at the moment is the lack of tradespeople and professionals to carry that out. So with the option of lighter solutions, there are opportunities to review embodied carbon of various building methods. This is not a one size fits all, but this is a level of detail through digital input that can be assessed at an earlier stage to see what where can the benefits be sought for a particular design. In our digital models, we are tracking a significant amount of data from the structure to certain fabric elements externally and internally. So this allows the designers to assess as they are going in relation to embodied carbon. As this develops further, it will allow more detailed live assessments to try and achieve the most sustainable design. I also believe that the term or role structural sustainable engineer will become more commonplace in the months and years ahead, as the primary structure in particular has such a significant impact on the embodied carbon and sustainable designs of our projects. So look, time is brief. So look, I hope I covered the subject there, and thank you again for inviting me on today.
Thanks very much, James. James, just a point of clarification. Evolution are a consultancy, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so you would work with a variety of different off-site solutions, is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
So yeah, timber, yeah.
Yeah, so going back to the categories, it's primarily your category 1, all types of modular suppliers, and your category 2, various predominantly steel frame, some timber, and then you've other elements like specific products and innovative products that are developed in there. So we kind of work across that field.
So you would work with a variety of different off-site solution providers?
Yes, correct. Yes, we would.
Okay. I think we might just take one question there. We have a question there from Ross. What stage is modular residential at in Ireland compared to the UK? And what do you think are the blockers to adoption in Ireland? And I know that Zoe will be touching on this, but maybe James, you could just, from your perspective, maybe address that one.
Yeah, so I suppose the key thing, I suppose one of the primary drivers in terms of delivering, especially for housing, is you really need to have an NSAI certified system. At the moment, there are 3 on the market, to the best of my knowledge. So I think but there's a number of others that are in kind of R&D work to achieve that. So I think one of the important things is that there are options in the market to go to, but that's also a kind of a risk element. So it gives developers and things like that options when they're tendering projects. And again, I suppose you need, I suppose it once more projects become developed and there's more confidence in what's being delivered, and there's a lot of guys out there that a lot of companies that are certified in delivering very, very good projects. There's great opportunities for them, but it's just to get out there, deliver more projects, and just kind of educate the market a bit more.
Yeah. But does that fact that there's only 3 NSAI systems certified, does that limit the pool?
Limits the pool. No, again, you have your modular, which is your full 3D finished systems, but then you also have your category 2, which is your panelized systems. So like you do have a mixture of options on the category 2, shall we call it, panelized systems, like John's company. Like there is a vast amount of options out there at the moment, and a lot of companies that are working there, doing a lot of projects. But in the category 1, call it 3D, there's a lot of companies that are coming up and are really about to get very, very busy in what they're doing. But I think what will help is once there's maybe more in the market to give the general market maybe more options, it'll just give the whole industry a bit more confidence, I think.
Okay, well, thanks very much, James. And I think you did an excellent job in giving us an overview there. You mentioned the Hackett report. You talked a lot about the speed, and it's not just speed of on-site installation, it's speed and design, isn't it? It's speed right across the life cycle of the project. We all know that if you design and build in the factory, that you can rapidly install on site. So thanks very much for that. And very impressive figures with that Lewisham project. I'm just wondering, if you compare that 40% saving in time, how would that compare to a traditional building?
Yeah, I say Vision modular systems are probably what they deliver is extremely impressive. Like in the last year, they've just completed the tallest modular building in the world, and they're about to go taller than that. They're 44 stories plus. So look, they have a very unique model that works. But it's really down to their learnings, their processes, their collaborations. I think maybe one of the key things from their perspective is the continuity of the design teams as well. So the learnings and developments is taken from project to project as they've developed. So there's a combination of reasons why they were there so quick and so successful.
Thanks, James. And it's great to see such a great turnout this afternoon. And please put your questions into the chat. I'm sure there'll be plenty of them. And that focus that you gave, James, of collaboration certainly featured in your presentation. So we're going to go to our second speaker now, John. And John, I was just looking at your online website there, and it's interesting to see that you're talking about real value for money. You're talking about comfortable, safe living environments. You're talking about sustainable materials. So you're hitting really all the sweet spots there. So John, over to you.
Bear with me there a second.
No problem. And actually, are you okay, John?
I think so, yeah. Can you see that presentation?
Hi, John. Sorry, we can actually see the notes there.
Bear with me now 1 second. So
yeah. No, it was interesting at CETA Tech Live. There was a lot of talk around, just before John get ready there, a lot of talk around this new focus, moving away from traditional cost, time, quality KPIs, more towards value, carbon, and safety. So I suppose the point I was making, John, is those 3 pillars of value for money. It might cost a little bit more, but you're getting greater value. That you're focusing on sustainability as a solution and building safely, that really you're really hitting the sweet spot there. So over to you, John. Over to you, John.
Is that showing okay there now?
That's showing fine, yeah.
Okay, bear with me now 1 second. So that's okay?
Yes, that's okay.
So apologies. So basically, good afternoon, everybody. The focus of my presentation is going to be on the use of modern technologies and digitalization to facilitate the growth and development of our business over the last 5 years or so. Just by way of introduction, Signum is a timber frame manufacturing company. We're based in Cork. For those unfamiliar with timber frame, it's an offsite method of construction where we replace the inner leaf of a blockwork building with a factory manufactured highly insulated timber frame structure. So we supply and install external and internal wall panels, floors, and roof structure, and all these are installed in a matter of days. The company was established in 1997, so we're celebrating 25 years, our 25th anniversary this year. We supply a variety of markets, including schools, multi-story apartments in the UK, care homes, but I suppose our primary focus at this stage is on low-rise housing in Ireland. Timber frame is very much a growing market. The most recent stats from the Irish Timber Frame Manufacturers Association show the timber frame market share has increased from 37% in 2020 to 48% of all new low-rise housing in Ireland. This has happened for a number of reasons. It addresses a lot of the challenges faced by house builders, including shortage of skilled labourers on site, output challenges and programme certainty. For example, at the start of a project, we'll typically tie down a delivery programme with the builder for 3 to 6 months ahead. And we deliver, let's say, a pair of semi-detached houses. They're generally erected with the roof on in a matter of 2 days. That gives the builder excellent certainty and control over their program and scheduling of other works. There are significant quality benefits, obviously, that go with a factory manufactured timber frame. And obviously, timber frame has to be price competitive. Timber frame also has the added benefit of being a highly sustainable form of construction. Timber itself is probably the most sustainable of mainstream, construction materials. And in a recent report commissioned by the Irish Timber Frame Manufacturers Association, we found that timber frame has the lowest embodied energy by far of all mainstream forms of construction. But I suppose a big part of the success of timber frame in Ireland is down to product development. In the past 10 years, our timber frame system has evolved significantly. If you go back, let's say about 10 years ago, external walls were supplied to site as open panels, excuse me, where insulation was fitted on site. That has changed. We now supply closed panels with insulation, airtight membranes and service cavities fitted in the factory. Separating or party walls were supplied open, and plasterboard sheeting was fitted on site. They now have insulation and plasterboard fitted in the factory. And where we used to manufacture floor panels from solid timber joists, we now supply floor panels with engineered joist systems and with provision for services. So going back about 5 years ago, we decided we wanted to grow our business, grow our output, but at the same time do a lot more in the factory than we'd have done previously, and this was going to be very challenging. What it meant for us was that we were going to have an exponential increase in the number of kit parts and tasks in the factory. We faced the potential of a large increase in labour requirement. We needed even tighter tolerances than would have been before because there are so many parts to each kit. But I suppose more than anything, we faced operational challenges like planning, sequencing, waste control, and operations management. So when we looked at this, and we concluded that we needed to we were bringing a lot more site tasks into the factory. And we decided we had to do it in a way that brought benefits to the process in terms of things like production rate, labour rate, waste reduction, and quality. Because if we didn't do that effectively, we would effectively be creating a building site in a shed without bringing any meaningful benefits to the overall build process. So we needed to apply the most advanced manufacturing systems and thinking to our operation. Without wanting to be overly negative about what happens on building sites, But if you look at this graph with the stats from the CSO, you can see how manufacturing has improved dramatically in productivity over the past 20 years, in contrast with construction, which has barely changed. Obviously, manufacturing has benefited from huge advancements in technology, but also from management systems like lean manufacturing and continuous improvement. So we looked at our model, and if you go back 10 years, we had an effective model to do what we were doing at the time. We took architects' drawings in, we produced 3D designs that were used for drawing approval with our external clients, but are also used for the manufacturing process. And from those 3D drawings, we produced cutting lists for our panel saws and our crosscut machines. And we produced 2D printed drawings for printed panel drawings for the panel assembly area. As I say, that was effective for what we were doing at the time. In terms of showing kind of practically what that involved, this is a basic single head crosscut that we would have used in the past for cutting wall studding, floor joists, and roof timbers. It was limited to square cutting timber. It was a very effective machine. It had basic and pretty basic functionality. This was a standard panel saw, again, with very basic functionality. Product quality from this machine was very good, but safety tended to be a bit of an issue with it. And a lot of the panel manufacturing was manual. Now, I should say not all, and we had some automated panel manufacturing equipment, but in a lot of cases, panels were assembled manually and nailed together with nail guns. Don't get me wrong, our model was very effective for what we were doing at the time, and served us well for many years. So we did a root and branch review of our operation. We visited manufacturers in other industries. We looked at information systems. We engaged in a lean manufacturing program. And given what we needed to do, we very much bought into the you can't manage what you don't measure philosophy. And at this point, I'd have to credit Enterprise Ireland for being extremely supportive through this process, both in developing a lean program and introducing us to much larger, more advanced manufacturers in different industries that otherwise we may not have been able to access. So that whole process took us down the following road. Our design office is now very much the nerve center of our operation. As I mentioned earlier, we still produce full 3D models of houses, but every last component now is represented digitally. This information leaves the design office in what we describe as a digital web of information, traveling through the factory and ultimately onto the building site. That information includes cutting files, machine files, operator instructions and drawings, loading lists, bills of materials, erecting instructions, and various reports flow from the 3D digital model. This is a diagram now. If you compare that to the one I showed you earlier, this is a diagram now of how the information flows from 3D designs through the factory floor. In actual fact, what you're looking at is a screenshot of a live program on our operations manager's computer. So each tan box there represents a workstation in the factory where an operation takes place. And the blue box represents the input and output of materials and data from that station. The arrows obviously represent the flow of materials and information through the process. So from this digital dashboard, each element of the house can be tracked live throughout the system, and changes can be made without affecting the flow of manufacture. So we invested heavily in automated equipment, a lot of which we took from other applications and industries and modified to our own requirements. This piece of equipment, for example, this replaced the cross-cutting machine we were looking at earlier. But not alone does it cross-cut the timber, but it also pre-drills holes, cuts notches and angles, and operates at a speed and precision that we wouldn't have seen before. It is a much more advanced brain than previous machines. It has the ability to interpret what designs called for, to automatically select the tools needed for the process, and to get the very most out of each piece of timber. And most importantly, it has the ability to feed into our information and reporting systems. This machine was a replacement for basic panel saws. The way this operates, when the operator starts a new project, the machine calculates the material it needs and optimizes cutting patterns to minimize the waste generated. It then automatically picks the material it needs from preloaded bays, be that 9mm OSB, 18mm OSB, plasterboard or insulation. And it brings that material then to the saw and processes the sheets. Each item is then given a unique label number and is stacked in the correct order for manufacturing. And again, like the previous machine, it has a much larger brain that feeds into our reporting system. So basically, in pre-labeled, fully processed material comes to the assembly area in the order it's needed. We don't use measuring tapes now on the factory floor, and thankfully we use very little paper. We use panel assembly equipment now on all production lines, like this multifunction bridge that basically takes digital information and locates all the panel nailing requirements on an XY axis and automatically nails them. These machines are very accurate, operate at a very high speed, and if you walk into the factory, they sound like machine guns when they're operating. The ramping up in automation and developing of information systems, I have to say, wasn't easy. From the data commissioning, in reality, most of these machines took between a year and 18 months to get them where we wanted them to be. So the improved automation, on the one hand, has allowed us to streamline the operation and to improve our productivity and efficiency. But over and above that, we've benefited hugely from the digitalization process and the capability of the machines to work within our information systems, both in terms of taking information to operate and producing live reports. So if I go back to the statement that you can't manage what you don't measure, we can now see in real time what is happening throughout the manufacturing process, and that allows us to manage our operation much more effectively. This illustration represents just one part of the manufacturing line. And as you can see, we're monitoring productivity from machines, waste levels, actual output versus programmed output, and all that's happening in real time. We now get comprehensive reports daily covering all key performance indicators. We run lean continuous improvement program with cross-departmental meetings happening daily. But without the information systems we have in place, it would be very difficult to make real progress at these meetings. From our point of view, the results have been excellent. We've seen a very significant reduction in waste. We've seen improvements in productivity and the consistency of performance between different shifts. We've been able to react quickly and see where and why problems are arising in real time, and it's taken the guesswork out of most management decision making. And it's been a real positive transformation for our business. So finally, if I could just finish by saying that, in my own view, that when we talk about MMC, it's often kind of measured in terms of the amount of work that's done off-site, whereas in my view, we should really see it as more to do with the application of advanced technology and management systems in the factory to what is currently done on site, than simply taking site tasks and replicating them in a factory. That approach has allowed us to grow our business effectively, and hopefully will allow us to continue to make progress both in terms of output and product development. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Fascinating insight there into a factory.
I'm missing you there, Alan. Apologies.
Can you hear me there?
I have you now, yeah.
Yeah. No, a really fascinating insight into, I suppose, the factories of the future.
Apologies, Alan.
Sorry, Alan, are you covering the mic by any chance?
No. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm in a cafe here at the moment, so apologies about that. But no, really interesting presentation there. They move towards more automation. Just quick question for you there. To what extent did you reduce your labor input as a consequence of your automation?
If I turn that question slightly on its head, Alan, we're doing a lot more now in the factory than we would have done when we set out in this process, if you know what I mean. So if I take the basic processes of making an open panel timber frame, we certainly have reduced that marginally, but not dramatically. But what this has done, I put it this way: if we didn't do this, we couldn't produce what we're producing now. We would probably require, I'd hazard a guess, maybe 30%, 40% more labor in the factory than we currently have. So, and it would be a kind of a touch of spaghetti junction about it in terms of efficiencies. So it's, in terms of productivity, it's been very key to us making progress.
And thank you. And just one question there from Louis Gunnigan there. Has the impact of rising timber prices had a negative effect on the demand for your products?
The timber prices rose dramatically in the first and second quarters of last year. And I think when that started to happen, we would have been quite concerned about its impact on the market. But I have to say, it had very little impact on demand. It meant that for us as a business, we had to have, how would I put it? We take a very much an open book approach with our clients. But once we manage it properly, I think, there was very, very little, if any, fall off in demand.
Okay, thank you so much, John. I'm sure there'll be other questions as we approach the end of the event. Thanks very much for that insight into an offsite manufacturing company. So our third speaker, Zoe Kennedy from Modularize, will be now going through, I suppose, the challenges associated with offsite construction. As I said at the very start, the approach of the Alliance in 22 was to look at challenge, change, learn. In many respects, James spoke a lot about the challenge that these companies need to have, NSAI certification. I know John spoke a lot about the changes taking place in the factory, the need for continuous investment, and it's great to see the support Enterprise Ireland are giving, but also to learn from, messages from home, but also abroad, and actually a company like Modularize, a significant player in the UK, I'm sure we can learn a lot from you, Zoe, and what you're going to bring us through. So over to you.
Thank you. I can take it. You can see my presentation, okay?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay, so Alan said I'm Zoe Kennedy, and I head up communications for Modularize, who are an offsite design consultancy based in the UK. So I've got quite a lot of slides to get through, so I'm going to try my best. So I just want to give you a quick overview of Modularize and what we do. And then I want to give you a high-level overview of the industry and just talk about some of the challenges that the industry is facing. I guess as we have a housing shortage in the UK, we will probably share a lot of similarities with you in Ireland. And then I want to talk about how Modularize and the industry are overcoming some of those barriers and challenges to promote offsite housing. And of course, the real prize here, I want to show you some actual results, and I want to show you some projects to show you, if we think differently, then we can use offsite construction which can indeed, speed up housing delivery. And at Modularize, we call that the Think Smart, Build Smarter approach. So just about us then. Modularize, as I said already, we are an offsite design consultancy. So we were set up in 2011 to enable construction leaders to build smarter by designing the best systems and solutions to maximize project value. I read that one. Our in-house team actually comprises of architects, engineers, and consultants, and we're involved at every stage in the construction life cycle with design for manufacturer, DFMA at the core of everything we do. So as architects, we can either take a lead design role, or we can work alongside an appointed architect to optimize the design for offsite. And this is really important as well, this point. This is in line with the project brief and the client objectives, and it's really important that I say this, that every project is different, so there's no one size fits all solution, and I'll come back to that later on in the presentation. Our DFMA engineers, they work alongside our architects to ensure the design intent is interpreted correctly for manufacturing and installation. And on the consultancy side, we assist our clients with new product development. So basically designing new products for the offsite market, and we set up factories and we optimize processes for offsite delivery. So we do a lot. We cover a whole range of services within the offsite sector. And to date, we've worked on some very groundbreaking projects. As we know, I think I've just gone too far. it's well documented in the construction sector that there's lots of challenges. Low productivity levels. We've got issues with costs. We've got issues with supply and labour. There's fragmentation in the market, and this is simply because house building has not changed in 6,000 years from when the Mesopotamians invented a process for casting clay bricks. And can you believe that process still hasn't changed today? We still build in bricks and mortar. I'm just going to give you a bit of a timeline. There's been a lot of industry reports over the years stating the benefits of offsite. They're well documented, so I'm not going to go on about the benefits. But, offsite application, kind of was first brought in since 1934 when Alfred Boson arrived in America, and he was kind of exasperated by how slowly we construct our skyscrapers in America. And then obviously we've gone on to the Farmer Modernise or Die report. And in all these reports, offsite construction has been recommended as part of the solution to improving construction. And in 2019, in the UK, we finally saw our government championing MMC, modern methods of construction, in order to build better quality houses faster and more sustainably. Since then, we've actually had a lot more reports as well. So the barriers, there's quite a few. I'm just going to touch on some of these. I'll just do a bit of an overview and then I'll go into some of them in a bit more detail. But, it's important to really understand, that an offsite project, is not going to run the same as a traditional one. And typically, these are some of the barriers that you will face. So design, in offsite, it will require design to come first. We're kind of building precision engineered buildings. So, for example, in the automotive industry, we don't expect car manufacturers to set up a production line and roll off a car every 30 seconds from, through a few drawings showing plan sections and elevations. We have to tell them, to subcontract, it's just crazy. So a manufacturer needs much more detail, basically. They need to know every nut and bolt, and it needs to be planned and carefully considered. Cost, the cost of, this is quite a topical one, especially in the UK at the moment, but the cost of offsite buildings varies significantly across the supply chain. This might be for lots of reasons. It could be because, due to how they actually are designing it, it might be a constraint, in the manufacturing process. It could be the choice of material that they're using, cross-laminated timber versus steel, for example. So, it's not like for like when it comes to pricing, simply. So next one, process. This is a much different to traditional construction because it's going to happen much faster. So if you build a house, for example, it's going to take anywhere between 3 to 10 weeks on average from the start of the building to that house actually arriving on site. So, in that time, you will have paid up to anywhere between 70 and 90% of the costs to the manufacturer. So that is hugely different compared to traditional. The site needs to be ready, your groundworks need to be done. And this causes significant issues really in terms of coordinating all of that, all the inbound services, and therefore, it's a massive, it's very difficult to coordinate. Before all of the disruption that we had with the war and so on, we were, there was a 3 to 6 month lead time in the UK, and that was if you were lucky, and that was for all the extras, all the services coming on site, all the trades to finish off on a traditional building, that is. So also risk, some funders see offsite construction as big risk. When your project is being built in the factory, there's a question always, who owns it? It's kind of vital to understand, vesting certificates, payment terms, and how all these relate to your cash flow and your risk profile with the banks. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then knowledge. So offsite in particularly, in the UK residential sector is a real emerging market, and with like any emerging market, people jump on it, and there's huge gains to be had. So it's kind of a bit of a warning, but many manufacturers spend lots of millions of pounds projecting this kind of secret formula, that they spent millions developing a system, so they must have IP, and it's this real unwillingness to collaborate and share that is a huge barrier in the industry. And I know James there touched on collaboration and how important it is, because it really is to drive innovation and efficiencies in the sector, and we must share the learnings from each other. So the last one, procurement. So you've really got to know your manufacturer. You've got to know their payment terms. Because they will be quick and frequent and offer, and often there is a pro forma upfront payment which is required. So that's quite standard in our industry. If you're working with public sector, they generally have to procure through frameworks, and although there's lots been done around of frameworks, making them in line for an offsite construction model, they're still very traditional in many ways, and don't suit offsite procurement. So that's something to be aware of as well. The next slide. So designing from the start, I'm just going to pick up a little bit more on this from a design point of view. So when you embark on a new project, this is the time, this is the moment when you need to decide that you're actually going to incorporate offsite elements. Adding offsite post-planning very, very rarely adds any value from our perspective or from our experience. We often use the word shoehorning at modularize, and we say, you're shoehorning modular or panelized into a project, compromises design. So, in order to ensure an efficient and cost-effective solution, in your project, you need to design with offsite in mind. And we kind of advise our clients to bring us in at feasibility, ideally REBA stage 0, so we can look at basically everything, logistics, transport, the suitability of offsite, and which systems could be best suited. So you've always got to remember, in manufacturing, there's a different set of constraints to traditional construction, and we've got to focus on the manufacturing and assembly, the transportation and the installation. We've got different health and safety requirements during install and finishing, and then what do we do at the end of the project? So these are all considerations that we have to make in the early design stage, and so that's a lot different to how we build traditionally. So obviously, again, this actually requires a huge degree of collaboration between the designer and the manufacturer in order to increase the optimization for the manufacturing, whilst, of course, retaining the all-important aesthetic intent. And also really, really important as well in house building, in order to ensure an appropriate level of placemaking. So the influence of the system can influence the design subtly or vastly, and without knowing the intricacies of the different types of offsite system, there's a tendency to kind of pigeonhole one form of offsite construction and apply it with general thinking. And it's knowing all these intricacies and that really gives the client the edge, so they can kind of maximize their project value. And that's where we kind of coin the phrase a little bit. It's process, not product. So when it comes to offsite construction, you've got to require a standardized series of elements of processes. It's not just a standardized house. So my next slide, DFMA. So yep, we absolutely need to design for manufacturing and assembly. So I kind of used the analogy a little bit before with regards to the automotive industry, and you can't imagine Ford, for example, manufacturing from a plan section and elevation drawing. So we need much more detail, and we've got to understand every component and every sub-assembly. We need to design for assembly sequence. We need to design for the supply chain capabilities. We need to design for transport, delivery, installation. We need to design basically for everything. So modularize, we like to extend the DFMA further and use the DFX, because there's so many other things that we need to consider than just manufacturing and assembly. So I just want to touch on cost a little bit, because I think this is a good one. But because of the lack of collaboration that we have in the industry, sharing of information and which is due to sharing of information or lack of. It's often indicated that off-site construction is expensive, and the key point really is when you're looking at off-site projects, you need to look at the whole life cycle costs. Yes, the upfront design may appear a risk, but to know with certainty that your material costs, your build costs in the factory, and your time to install will ultimately pay you dividends. When you take into account less time on site, and we start to look at, we start to produce the prelims and overall construction costs, even on a larger scale, especially on a larger scheme, these savings are going to be really, really significant. So a faster build time is hugely essential for the private rented sector, hotels and students accommodation sectors, and the faster we can move people into those buildings, the faster obviously we can make a return. So often in these sectors, we do see standardized designs already, and with repeatable modules. And although, we kind of crave the flexible and bespoke buildings in residential, the more we can standardize, the more we can reduce build costs. And if we take that into account, the building and life cycle costs, then obviously we can reduce so much more in terms of energy savings for the homeowners or tenants, for example. Mortgages and warranties. So obviously, once you've built your house, you need to know that you can sell it. Without that, you need to be able to get some form of mortgage. In the UK, BOPAS are kind of leading the way in the offsite sector, setting up a body to specifically accredit MMC buildings and modularize, do a lot of work, helping clients with the process and producing all the technical information needed to achieve the compliance. Developers, then I guess subject their scheme to a durability and maintenance assessment, and then when that scheme is accredited, then the market is that they can obviously market the property as an assured, as being assured by the provider. So it is hard work in many ways, convincing the warranty providers technically that the system meets their standard. But generally, the accreditation bodies, just want to show your product is being manufactured in a factory of a certain standard. So it's just really important to kind of ensure your manufacturer has the right quality management system in place. So with procurement, so as I mentioned, models for procurement are still designed for traditional construction. And whilst more traditional forms of contract have elements that can be adapted to suit modular, none of these really address the factory to finish building model, and design must come first and is paramount, for the delivery of a project. So most standard copyright clauses state that the IP in the product remains with the creator, and the clients using offsite will often need arranging right to use the design for its brand of housing developments across multiple sites. So there's lots of challenges there, and it kind of suggests that the IP in this case would possibly need to be split between the designer and the developer. So another point as well really is manufacturers have different payment terms, and you've got to remember your buildings are going to be built really fast. So you need to develop a bespoke inspection schedule to process detailing stages of factory sign off, and these inspections obviously will release the payments to the manufacturer. An offsite manufacturer often requires an upfront deposit, somewhere between 10 to 30%, and then some form of bond from the manufacturers is needed for the creditors. So there's the longer the track record of a manufacturer, the more kind of the less risk you have really. It is an emerging, the residential sector in particular is emerging. So many of the manufacturers are new, and that's a bit of a challenge. But, we also need to consider, who's going to be responsible for damage used during transport and install. So, contracts do need to be, bespoke, and they have to set out all the provisions and, for these obligations. So next one, finance. You need to think about, how you're going to fund your offsite development. Although there is I guess, a growing sense of confidence with the lenders, certainly in the UK. There's still a lot of the big banks and institutions that are still quite wary. The main problem in offsite, until installed on site, all the assets are sat in the manufacturing facility with one supplier. So there is risk if you lose everything if the factory goes under. Now, if the manufacturer does the design, then also you're at risk of losing the design as well. So of course, you can perhaps reclaim your goods and materials, but who's going to finish a half-built project with a system that they may not understand? So it's generally difficult to transfer your product to another manufacturer anyway. So a vesting certificate is something lenders do understand, and a performance bond is something they understand. So it's really key that you kind of spend the time to understand these things in order to ensure you've got some kind of assurance. And then obviously the main part in terms of our projects, just to prove the concept a little bit. So I just want to go through some of the projects that Modularize have been involved in to date. So this one actually, Allenby Connaught, isn't actually residential, but it's a great example of a modular project. It's supplied by Chorus Living Solutions, which was bought out by Tata Steel and rolled along. And this was a huge project, modular project, probably I think the largest UK modular project, and it was providing the single accommodation to the Ministry of Defence. And at Chorus, they kind of were finishing the modules, finished modules were actually coming off the production line every 80 minutes, and one of these buildings, fully snagged, handed over to the client, was done in once a week. So that was quite impressive. This one here, Ilka Homes, this is one of our big emerging manufacturers, one of our giants, probably recognised. You'll probably see them in the news. So this was set up by a venture capitalist, TDR, who brought together Elliott and Keepmoat, and their Keepmoat and Housing Association to deliver more homes. And this is a fully finished steel residential system. Then we have Top Hat. So yeah, we work with Top Hat from inception, from the consultancy and device through to prototype and design, and then the implementation of business systems. So Top Hat offer timber modular system with an amazing attention to detail. They're really pushing the boundaries in many ways with high quality manufactured housing. And obviously you may have seen this in the news as well. In 2019, Top Hat received a 75 million investment from one of the largest investment banks in the world, Goldman Sachs. Innerspace, these are one of our SME developers, and they're leading the way in beautifully designed, architecturally driven and sustainably led homes. Innerspace was designed using our own standard steel chassis, which can be manufactured by multiple manufacturers, and these are definitely ones to watch. N-House, these quite interestingly, they're a crowd-funded startup using a CLT cross-laminate timber modular system. N-House is a great example of actually how new thinking can break the mold in terms of funding of an MMC product development. N-House has a range of beautifully designed customizable homes, and they've got a range of options such as a robotic vacuum cleaner and the drone landing pad. And we've been working with N-House to expand their product offering. So Osco Homes, these guys are working with housing associations and local authorities to deliver social and affordable housing. And we've worked again with them since inception. So Osco is a light gauge steel panelized system. It's designed to be manufactured in a prism with strong social value. It involved a lot of simplification of the design, where we created like almost IKEA style drawings, and the installation team was made up of ex-offenders who were given employment, they were given homes, and more importantly, they were given a chance. So Osco's pipeline has grown significantly, and they're now got a second factory. So conclusions, I guess there are many MMC systems and materials. Really important to remember that no one size fits all. Design with offsite in mind from the start, working closely with your offsite design and manufacturing team. Offsite construction requires a standardized series of elements and approach, not just a standardized house. With the right advice and direction, a mortgage should be easy to obtain. And please remember to understand payment terms because they will be different, and also find a lender that understands offsite. And that brings my presentation to an end. So thank you very much for that.
Wow, thanks, Zoe. That was a real masterclass in offsite. I know there was so much information in your head, you just needed to get it out, but I think you touched on every aspect of offsite, and you get a real sense that you guys fully understand, as John and James do as well, the offsite industry and the offsite challenges. So thank you so much. We're probably going to run a little bit after 2 p.m., maybe around 10 past, quarter past 2. But we have some questions, so I might ask the speakers just to put the cameras back on, and there'll be a few questions there. So for James, this probably is for you. If modular can take 40% less time to project completion, how does this reflect on personnel requirements? Are there any comparative examples of personnel levels required for modular only projects set against traditional?
What I would see is, I suppose you probably have a shorter design period, but maybe a more intensive design period. So like in terms of design, that's probably more or less the same. And also you still need the personnel in the factories making the panels or the modules. So but in a much more controlled environment. So I think definitely on site though, especially with some of the panelized, but especially with some of the modular, like some of those larger modular schemes are, done with a much less reduced personnel on site than say a traditional build. So there's definitely on site in particular, which, less interactions, theoretically safer. I think someone mentions there in their thing about prelims, and all of that, so that all comes into play there.
Yeah. So really, this is a question for all of you, really. When it comes to making a decision to build off-site, it's not really the client's decision, is it? I mean, the client just wants the building, and they want they need it on time, budget, and to the quality. Isn't it really the contractor's decision? They are the builders, they are the experts. So does this bring back the point that really we need to rethink how we procure, and that contractors really need to be involved at the very early stages, or at the early stages, so they can actually, think from the start, think modular from the beginning. They are the people who do the building.
My brief thing on that is, I think it'd be definitely yes in a way, but I think it'd be even better coming from the developer themselves from the start, because they will have given the brief, especially in modular, to kind of cater a design that's going to kind of lend itself to an offsite system. So like a lot of that can already be too late by the time the contractor is appointed. So I think there's a bit of a two-way thing there, I would say.
Yeah, of course, you need an informed client, don't you? You need a client who understands, like what Zoe was saying. They understand, even the lenders, they understand offsite, and the benefits it can bring. We've got a question there from Ross. For general contractors using offsite systems versus stick build, is there a cash flow impact? What upfront costs are needed early in the project? I think, Zoe, you touched on this, didn't you?
Yes, that's right. So I mean, obviously, design fees are going to be much higher, generally because there's more work involved in designing for absolutely everything with a offsite project. So it's kind of that buy-off, but in order to the manufacturing, you are going to get those costs back, but it's kind of, you've got to have the buy-in, and the more you do, so by doing your modular design once, then you can take the learnings to your next project, and then you're going to see some costs coming back your way as well.
If I could answer that question.
Yes, John, you're actually a manufacturer. You must experience this.
So we supply a lot of, let's say, large volume house builders, and from their point of view, we operate because it tends to be a consistent relationship from one scheme to another and all the rest. We develop a normal customer supplier relationship where they operate on obviously subject to certain criteria, but they'll typically operate on credit terms. It's not. I know this can be different if you're dealing with a one-off large, let's say, commercial project, but in our case, where it's ongoing replicated houses over sites, typically, we'll have credit terms in place where it's maybe 30 days from end of month of delivery or whatever. And if there are kind of financial constraints around the client, then we kind of tweak that to work for them and work for us. So there isn't really a negative there from a cash flow point of view. I would say overall it's a positive, because ultimately they get to a point where they can hand over the building. From a financing point of view, they can get to the point much quicker where they're handing over the building and can get and have cash from their customer in the bank. If you know.
Yes, but the contractor, the general contractor, may not be able to receive payment until the building is actually installed and there's practical completion. Or they might get an interim payment, but the point that impact?
The point I'm making, Alan, is that they get to that point a lot quicker in timber frame than if they built it. Ross mentioned stick build, but if they built it in masonry, it takes a lot longer to get to that point. If you know.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So Louis Gunning is in the comment there. The real savings are in the prelims, as the on-site time is shorter. Do we have any contractors on the call today? I mean, it'd be interesting to hear if any contractors on the call today have seen this, that there's a real reduction in the prelims, the fixed costs. Yeah. Question there from Ronan Larnigan. I think it's to you, Zoe. What was the scheme called on the last slide with the mansard roof?
Good question. That, looking at the slides, was that Osco with the pitch roof like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Osco Homes, and so that was the panelised, light gauge steel panelised system.
Oh, very good. So a question there from Liz. Why are county councils so negative about offsite projects with regard to granting planning permission? Will this change in Ireland?
Like one-off MMC projects, as in a one-off MMC house. Is it?
Yeah, I suppose someone touched on, I think it was Zoe touched on, the more we standardize, the more we can reduce costs. If we take, say, for example, social housing or even apartment building, if we can standardize design, surely we could deliver a lot quicker.
Yeah,
that's theoretical.
I think Liz has kind of confirmed yes to what I was asking there. I suppose I personally wouldn't be aware of the negativity on the one-off MMC projects, but I suppose the key thing for a really successful MMC is repetition and volume. So for the likes of John's company there, he prefer someone coming to him with 40 or 50 houses rather than maybe the one-off within reason, because it'll be more beneficial, and sometimes, especially on the modular side, that can be a bit more challenging on the commercial side. But I'm not aware of any negative planning elements.
Yeah, I'm sure if one looked into the detail, you'd find that quite a lot of local authorities are looking at this, and there are probably a number of MMC projects of different types, I suppose, in the country. So I'm just going to bring the formal presentations to a close and to thank James and John and Zoe for 3 really superb presentations. And of course, we've recorded this for Prosperity, and people can have a look back at this. This is another example of a quality event presented by CJ in association with Enterprise Ireland. So I'm going to ask Ross O'Coleman from Enterprise Ireland is with us. He's just going to say a few words as we finish, I suppose, the summer series. Yep. We'll be back in September. We'll more about that in a minute. But Ross, any kind of comments as you reflect back on the year thus far and what we've done?
Yeah, indeed. No, look, it's I think the fact that we're at 9 minutes past 2 going through lunch and we've still got a really strong attendance speaks to just the quality of the presentations by the speakers today. It was a really excellent session, as has been the series to date. And look, Enterprise Ireland are involved in this space because we were given a new mandate under Housing for All, and that's to support the domestic residential sector with productivity and innovation supports. As John pointed out there with that sobering slide, there's let's say a big opportunity to increase productivity in construction in Ireland. And the direction of travel that we've taken with those supports is very much around supporting and advocating for offsite modern methods of construction in residential building, and that's a lot of our supports are under that direction. And that came from our industry consultations, which identified a number of the issues that this series has covered, and that's been planning and procurement, the implementation of offsite, and then coming on to later on in the year, Alan, the skills issue is next up in September. Yeah. That's the next session, and that's going to be, look, it's a huge issue for the industry to essentially go from 20,000 homes to an average of 33,000 homes. It's more than a 50% increase, and you're not going to be able to just throw labour at that. And again, that's why we came back to offsite. So that's the next session in September, and then the series is going to wrap with an overview of the Construction Technology Centre. There will be formal announcements about that centre in the coming weeks, but by later on this year, that centre director will be in place, and we'll be able to get them in and I suppose grill them on what they're going to be doing for their first year to focus on the residential side as well.
Thanks very much, Ross, and just to thank our delegates for supporting us right through the year on these 4 events. And again, just to reiterate my thanks to James and John and Zoe. So many touching learning points that we got through. I think Zoe really summed it up at the end in that we need to really think differently, than in the traditional way. James, you spoke a lot about the importance of collaboration, and the importance, I suppose, you mentioned BIM and digitalization. John, you talked about you can't manage what you don't measure, what you can't improve on. So therefore, KPIs is so important. And Zoe, you talked again, you drove home that message about collaboration is really the driver for innovation of offsite. A change in mindset, it's process, it's not product. And that's an interesting comment at the end. The more we standardize, the more we can reduce the cost. And of course, everyone's mind is focused on costs at the moment. So thank you so much. So I don't know if anyone wants to share that last slide, but as I say, we will be returning on the 8th of September with our penultimate event, which is focusing on skills. We've already spoken about stimulating the residential contractors' supply chain. We've spent a whole event focusing on collaborative procurement models. And again, a lot of that was spoken about at CETA Tech Live. We spoke about digital planning, and we spoke today about the real focus on speed. So we hope you can join us on September the 8th. And also, we're really looking forward to meeting the people who have been successful with the Construction Technology Centre, and we've great hopes for that particular initiative. So, but listen, I had suffered a power cut earlier this morning. I had to rush and find a cafe to join you today. But really 3 excellent presentations. So thank you again, James, John, and Zoe, and I wish you all well in what you do and your families and your business, and wish everyone a good summer. Let's hope the rain stops and we can enjoy a bit of sunshine. So thank you to everyone, and to the CETA team, the background team, who are always there when we need them, and to you, Ross, and Enterprise Ireland for working with us thus far. Okay.
Take care.
Thanks, Alan. Cheers.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye. Thanks.